Hello everybody and welcome to another video. About a week ago I talked to you about a Tempest build for Heart of Thorns where you get to play with some new Tempesty stuff on your Elementalist and do a crap ton of damage. That build wasn't actually the thing that caught my eye most about this Elite Specialization, and today what I want to talk to you about instead of a high damage build is the concept of running an Auramancing Tempest. This is what I was originally interested in the spec for. This is what caught my eye the most from those initial streams. My general impression of Tempest is fairly lukewarm, but this was an angle of it that I was very much excited to try. For those of you who don't know, the Elementalist, as it released at launch, Guild Wars 2, kind of had some capability to be an Auramancer. The idea is one of the specific mechanics that Elementalist gets, along with attunement swapping, is on a lot of their weapon skills. Let's take something that's totally unrelated to Tempest. For example, Dagger Offhand. One of our weapon abilities here is this thing called Frost Aura. And some of our traits proc auras, and some of our traits improve the power of auras. And there was specifically an idea of sharing these auras out and all those traits and things to your friends through a water magic trait here called Powerful Aura. So this used to exist for Elementalists, but back when they changed Lion's Arch earlier on this year, they kind of killed the build completely. The build was already pretty crappy. The build was already not seeing much use in any format of the game whatsoever. Wild vs. Wild, PvP, or definitely PvE. And though, once again, it was a fun idea, it just never had a place in Guild Wars 2. What ArenaNet did, though, earlier in the year is they killed it completely to bring it back with the Tempest. So Tempest has more aura-based stuff, and you can make a pretty cool build built entirely about it, and the idea of an Auramancer is back. I want to talk about being an Auramancer today in terms of PvE and where I think it is. And the answer to that question, let's just get it out of the way straight away, is it still basically has very, very, very little use. A build like this you do for fun. A build like this you do because there's a ton of synergy in the kind of things you can build together. And a build like this you have to seek out those scenarios where it's actually useful. So even with Heart of Thorns, okay, Heart of Thorns slated to increase build diversity by making the jungle more engaging. What has that actually meant? Really, for support builds and builds that do a lot of heal support, as I'm about to show you here, there's still very little place. It's true, there's a lot more place for comedy damage in Heart of Thorns and Guild Wars 2 in general now. There's now a lot of place for control and CC, but support is still basically getting the short end of the stick. I would feel bad running this build in, say, the Chuck Gerrant boss fight, which I talked about in yesterday's video. I would feel bad running this in pretty much any of the big wild bosses. Healing is still unrewarding. People can die and get immediately rallied. Your healing capabilities do nothing for the downstate, and even if people do get defeated, they can easily waypoint back. Very few events can actually fail, so this has limited use. However, it is pretty nice if you're playing like two-man in story. You can play with a very glassy person and basically make the game super face roll by healing and supporting them massively. And when it comes to very small events, there are some situations this might see use. Verdant Brink, for example, at the nighttime, if you are going for a T4 push at Verdant Brink and there's lots of small camps around where you're going to have to defend from a lot of Mordrum but you can't Zerg, actually a build like this does okay. The same with Tarir, actually, the very map I'm in right now. The Southern Assault can be very dangerous and a lot of pressure gets thrown on people, so a build like this can support. The thing with the Aura support, though, is beyond just healing, of which it's kind of a 7 out of 10. You know, if we call a Druid or a Ventari Revenant a 10 out of 10, this is sort of a 7 out of 10 on the healing scale. It also provides a lot of other forms of support, such as stunning enemies, building might, building weakness, applying fury to your allies, reducing incoming damage with stupidly high amounts of protection, and 10% damage reduction from the Frost Aura, reflects, stuff like that. And stuff like that is very exciting, but do consider it's not always valuable. If you want to play with a ton of the new Tempesty stuff, the previous build I showed was like a little bit of Tempest mixed in, but largely very similar normal Elementalist stuff. If you want to play with a ton of Tempest stuff, this is your build. This is a very different playstyle. It utilizes a ton, if not as many of the new abilities as possible, and it works best with Warhorn. It shines best playing into the Tempest, and so that's another reason I've actually had a fair amount of fun on it. So, let's first talk about the weapons. Yes, it's a Warhorn build. Warhorn genuinely is, on this build, better than any other Elementalist offhand. Now, that's a very rare thing to see, but the reason Warhorn is great is because of two abilities specifically. Ability number one is Heat Sink. This allows you to pulse out a ton of might and fury to your allies. This build can push 25 might to 5 people around you all on its own. Not permanently, but it can have it up there for a long period of time. So we'll talk about that soon. And the other really important thing that this offhand has available over any of the others is this here Sand Squall, which is a powerful aura, as well as protection, as well as increasing boon duration and being a blast. And that blast's important. It's not a crazy perk, but it's also true that Warhorn gives you a water field that you can then blast with your dagger. Dagger's great because it's got a very low cooldown aura application ability and a powerful enough aura at that. Your only other option is Scepter, which has no auras at all, so that's why I run Dagger. As for the utility skills, you're basically going to run pure shouts, except the heal, which can be a shout if you want, and this shout is incredible on a heal support build. Wash the Pain Away heals massively to allies around you, big spike heal. Or you can just run something as simple as Arcane Brilliance, which again is another blast for your water field here, say, on your Warhorn. But before we really get into that, because these things do a lot of things, let's talk about the traits. So, specializations. We're actually going to go in reverse order because this will make most sense. So first, Tempest. Of course, it's a Tempest build. So what are we running? The most important thing, the reason this build exists is because of this new Grandmaster trait here, which really deserves to be a water trait, but we'll ignore that fact. Elemental Bastion. Elemental Bastion does this. It means that your auras heal. And the base heal on those auras is actually not too bad. Not only do they heal, but they heal all your allies too, whether you're aura sharing or not through water magic. So it's about a 1,500 heal on the gear that I'm currently running. That gets boosted to about 2,000 through our Benevolence, somewhere around there. And specifically as we stack our sigils up, this can be a pretty nice heal. That's the first thing it does. It also means, conveniently, when we get damage below 75% of our health, we get a Frost Aura. Frost Aura is basically, for PvE's sake, one of the strongest auras in the entire game. This is 10% less damage that stacks on top of toughness, stacks on top of the new food that also gives you 10% reduced incoming damage, and significantly wears away at Guild Wars 2's problem of having very high spiky DPS. One of the reasons healers generally aren't that great is because if you attritively heal, like this build does by pumping out tons of auras that slowly heal for small packets over time, it kind of doesn't mean anything when your friends just can get one-shot by a single big tail because they didn't dodge properly. Well, this build does get around that a little because it has tons of Frost Aura, which means those one-shots are no longer one-shots. So that's very nice. So this is the key thing about the build. All of our auras are healing. All these shouts on Tempest apply an aura. So our elite heals, our skill 9 heals, our skill 8 heals, our skill 7 heals, and our skill 6 will heal as well, which I'll talk about very soon. That also means that stuff like Shocking Aura here on our Dagger main hand also heals, as well as the Warhorn 4 also heals. All of it pretty nice. Moving on. Our auras also apply boons, so this is a bit of a decision you can make here. Specifically regeneration and specifically vigor here for 5 seconds each. This basically means for 5 targets around you, you have permanent vigor, you have permanent regen. Because I'm playing with kind of a heal angle here, that regen is worth an awful lot. Later on in this video, I'm going to talk about the idea of not running this on healing gear at all. And in that situation, you can actually take this trait up here, Tempestuous Area. What this does is allow you to stack crazy might. This doesn't actually affect your auras directly, but it affects your shouts, which apply auras. So it's kind of a question. What do you want? Do you want permanent vigor and regen? Or do you want very high weakness, which is basically damage mitigation as well, and might for your friends, specifically through the shouts that you're running? So you kind of get that decision to make. If you're not running heal gear, obviously it's much better to go for the might. And then, of course, also over here, we're going to take Unstable Conduit, and this means all of our overloads in every attunement also give an aura, which means not only do they do their base effect, but they give an aura at the end, the aura heals, and the aura applies regen and vigor. Excellent. So that's the way that Tempest works. That's how those traits are working. Moving on, we've got so many auras, we of course want to share them out, so water is a no-brainer. We're also running a Healy type spec, so water's got like this Grandmaster Minor here. It gives you 15% higher heals to your allies, so when you drop a heal on an aura on yourself, it's actually going to count for more on other people than it does on yourself. Well, the really important trait here, again we're going to go in reverse order, is Powerful Aura. This means that we share auras. By default, this skill 3 on this dagger it just affects us. But because of that water trait, when we pop it, it goes on our allies. Not only does its effect have some benefit, but then the vigor and regen also gets applied, and the heal is also being applied. So, that's a very strong trait. This middle tier here is actually questionable what you want to take. If you're running this build like with DPS gear, which is totally possible, I would actually recommend this bottom one here, which is 10% damage increase, which is quite nice, and reduces your heal cooldowns. This even has viability even when you're running heal gear. Or you can take a single Condi cleanse when you swap to water attunement. The one thing this build really lacks in some variations is a lot of Condi cleanse. So that's the other thing you can do. And then lastly, for the tier 1 here, we can give ourselves another aura. You've got Frost Aura here, whenever we get critically hit on a 20-second cooldown. But that's actually 2 sources of Frost Aura just from our, traits, right? If we get critically hit, we get Frost Aura from this trait, and then if we get hit again and go below 75% health, we get Frost Aura here. Unfortunately, these can double up in rare situations, but because they have different internal cooldowns, it just means a lot of Frost Aura is getting pulsed out. That means if someone attacks us, we're very likely to give ourselves Frost Aura, heal ourselves up, give ourselves a ton of boons, and then heal everyone around us and heal them up. You see the synergy? It's pretty cool, right? That's why I enjoy this build, because there's a lot of synergy you can build throughout your traits, even if it doesn't have too much use in the game just yet. Hopefully one day it will have more use. Finally, we have a choice. You can go either air or earth. First, I'm going to talk about air. So the Grandmaster, really, you don't have much of a decision. If you're running DPS gear, take Bolt to the Heart. That will help you. You can't really go very wrong there. Fresh Air, I really do question, isn't actually that useful, even though there's this exciting idea of constantly getting back to air attunement and popping your Shocking Aura really fast and going and overloading again. It's not that great. What I prefer is Lightning Rod. Why? Because the Warhorn actually has 2 powerful CC abilities. It's got this Cyclone ability here, and in Water Attunement, it's got Tidal Surge. Both of these can CC enemies, and that puts weakness down, which again is more damage mitigation and more support for your team. So I quite enjoy Lightning Rod. Air gets good here, though. First of all, you've got Tempest Defense. This, for most people, they take it because it's a damage increase against stunned foes, which is nice, but we're taking it because it means that if we get CC'd ever, we proc a Shocking Aura. That Shocking Aura does all the benefits that all of our Aura stuff does. So there's another Aura that comes in. You don't really get any use out of the top trait because that's to do with glyphs, and we're really not ever going to be running any glyphs. And lastly, the Air Magic Precision is useless, as well as the Air cooldowns really isn't too useful. So, finally, we've got this important trait. This is the main reason we take air, Zephyr's Boon. So you will have already noticed, when I popped a aura on this guy, he got Shocking Aura, Vigor, Regen, but he also got Fury and Swiftness. So by going air, we actually not only give permanent Vigor, permanent Regen, but we also give permanent Swiftness and Fury. And I'll demonstrate that here, so we'll zoom out so the skill effects don't look too bad. I'm just going to run through and pop a bunch of my auras, right? So we'll overload here. We'll use our Elite, which gives an aura. We'll use all of our utility skills, which give auras. We'll use our weapon skill aura. We'll swap to Earth. We'll use this aura. We'll wait for this overload. And what you're actually seeing here is I have more than enough. I'm already, 20 plus seconds for all of these boons, 50 seconds on the Swiftness. We're really not having any problems. We're actually maintaining a lot of boons at all times, just permanently having those boons out there, which goes to everyone. So that's nice. And Fury is a very powerful boon, 20% crit chance all in its own. That's great to have that permanently out on people. And Swiftness, just for running around the jungle, this is the trait I would recommend. This trait is fantastic, and I would recommend this setup. It's absolutely brilliant. Having 4 boons at a minimum always on people, but honestly, you're going to get more than 4 on you. Usually, you're going to have 6 on you because of the might and the protection. Is really good for some people on their other builds where they do more damage based on boons on them, and there's generally just some nice elements to it there. However, Fury and Swiftness are really common boons. A lot of people can put those out. So if you ever find yourself in a group of 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, whether you're doing story, whether you're doing dungeons, whether you're doing fractals, raids, whatever the hell, right? You probably got permanent Fury and Swiftness anyway. The value of putting perma Fury and Swiftness really isn't too great. And so instead of all this stuff, instead of the aura we get here on CC, instead of the weakness, instead of this, I actually thoroughly recommend Earth. So why do we take Earth? Well, the Grandmaster, you can kind of go with what you want. You can become immune to conditions if you like, or you can become immune to crits while you're in Earth Attunement. I really wouldn't recommend the Signet trait. Here you can take Geomancer's Training, which reduces this ability, Sand Squall's cooldown, which is really good. This is protection, this is a blast, this is an aura, and it extends the duration of all the other boons by 2 seconds on people. Fantastic skill. Reducing the cooldown on that is unquestionably the best thing to take. So Earth really isn't that great until you see this trait here, Elemental Shielding. Grant protection when applying an aura to yourself or an ally. And so what this means is we don't get Fury and Swiftness, but we do get protection. And perma protection on everyone around you? Now that's got some serious use. That's got some serious use, not just here in PvE, but that's got some use in small world versus world roaming groups if you're tightly packed. That's got some use in a lot of different places. Permanent protection is not easy to come by, and this build does that easily. Also, considering that you have permanent protection and a huge amount of frost aura, you can basically look at this build and the fact that on Tempest, protection is worth more to you, 40% reduced incoming damage instead of the regular value of 33%. Because your protection is so strong on Tempest, and you have a lot of frost aura, you can kind of look at this build as giving people 50% damage reduction, as well as a ton of heals. Things that are designed to one-shot you will actually now only do half damage, and people will survive, and then you can heal them back up. So Earth is absolutely awesome. It's just air's a nice option when you're generally running around the jungle, and maybe you want more boon spreading until you get more people. So, last of all to talk about are the runes. So, when I pop my heal skill here, this is a regular Elementalist heal skill. This is Arcane Brilliance. I already talked to you guys about where I'm running it. It's so that you can use the skill 5, and then you can blast in it with your heal. And, you know, you can get a fair extra bit of benefit to it there. But if you actually look at the skill here, nowhere does it say it applies an aura. So why is it then that when I use Arcane Brilliance, I don't just get a heal, but I get the 4 boons and I get an aura? Well, that's because of the runes. So, the runes I'm running are runes of Radiance. You'll notice I'm a very sturdy character as well. I have 19,000 health. For an Elementalist, that's an awful lot of health. So how did I end up getting that? Well, the runes contribute to it. These are the runes of Radiance. They give you Vitality, which really isn't great. They'd be better if they were healing power runes. But they have a ton of aura synergy. Every aura I apply with these runes lasts 33% longer than it would on any other character. So if I pop, you know, just Aftershock, this magnetic aura lasted, what was that, 6 seconds? It lasts a long damn time. So these runes actually allow you to basically chain lots of auras together. Also, importantly, you'll see the tier 4 there. It says when you use a heal skill, you gain a light aura. So it doesn't matter what heal I use at all. I'm actually getting the Guardian aura, which is the only aura that exists outside of the Elementalist class, and means at any one time I can actually, in theory, put out every single aura in the game. And I'll show that to you guys. Now, not only will we stack a ton of boons, but we can kind of have this fun, silly little idea of having all the auras too. So, here's what we do. We would go, what's most short-lived, I guess. What we'll do is we'll use Rebound first, which is going to give us shocking auras in a second. Then we're going to go use all of these. And you see my bottom row here? We have 5 auras on us. And our entire team would have these 5 auras on us. So we really stack up a lot of stuff. Light aura really isn't worth too much in big groups because the retail's not amazing. Retail's another boon, by the way, you're putting out to people through that light aura. But the vulnerability is not totally insane. But at least it's nice. So there's a lot of synergy with these runes. I very much recommend them. However, there is one caveat to the Runes of Radiance that you might want to consider something else. The other choice you have are Runes of the Trooper. Runes of the Trooper allow you to Condi cleanse on shout skill usage. And we have 5 shouts here. So it doesn't quite have the aura synergy. It's not going to give you an aura on your heal anymore. It's not going to lengthen any aura durations, which is a big thing to pay off. But this build does lack quite a lot of Condi Cleanse. You can trait for 1 Condi Cleanse on Water Swap, as I've explained. But the skill 5, despite being a water field, doesn't actually Condi Cleanse. You can't take the typical Condi Cleanse thing for Elementalists, which is Cleanse on Regen application, because you need powerful aura to share your auras. So you're really just relying on the Condi Cleanse from your Overload. So to get around that, you can run Trooper Runes. If I was running this in World vs. World or something, like on Celestial stats, I would totally be running the Condi Cleanse. That's the last thing really to talk about. That's the stats. Again, I'm running heal power here. Another reason my health is so high is because I'm going with Magi's healing, which is pretty bad, to be honest. You could run Clerics if you like. You could run Apothecaries if you like. I actually have Apothecaries trinkets over here, which would give you some condition damage and mean you do a little bit of damage at the same time. It's actually what I ended up running on the raids. But make no mistake, the idea of running healing power here is not actually necessary for the build. Everything I already talked to you about, all those benefits, can all be applied with a 0 healing power. That 50% damage reduction for your entire team, you don't need healing power to do that. You could do that on a Zerk build. You could do that on an Assassin's build. And actually, what I would say is running this setup, which I've done a lot of in the jungle, is that sturdy build you might be looking for. On the last build video I did when I talked about Tempest, I told you a totally YOLO crazy build. At one point in the video, you know, a random mob just shot a couple of arrows at me and I died because I didn't react in time. If you want a much more sturdy build that can still do damage, can still be okay, nothing insane in the damage department, but for generally wandering around the jungle, plays a lot with the new Elite Specialization stuff at your Tempest, I would definitely say running this trait setup and perhaps these runes But on damaging sets is the way to go. And specifically maybe in PvP and World versus World, if you run it on a Celestial set, you may see some benefits there too. So that's kind of the way it works. If you do want to go with the crazy heal angle and you want to pump out just massive heals to people, the food I'd recommend is Delicious Rice Balls, which gives you plus 10% Benevolence and gives you 100 healing power. And as well as a Furious Tuning Crystal, which is another 100 healing power, and even some Ferocity as well, which you don't really care too much about. But that's going to bump your healing power quite high. You can run like a Benevolent Sigil, which pushes your Benevolence even higher. And it means that even though Rebound really isn't a great skill, it can get some healing going. Rebound's pretty lackluster in many regards, but at least on this build, if you pop it and you don't get the benefit of resurrecting someone when they die, at the very least, it will run out and give you an aura. Okay, so at the very least you can do that. And, you know, the one really cool thing about Rebound at the moment, actually, is if you use it on Elementalist and Vapor form, it instantly reses them. But that's a bug that will get fixed. So, how would you play this build? There's two really big ways you can play it. You can spam the crap out of stuff. You can be like, I want to support you. I'm just going to use all of my stuff. And it can be very much a spammy playstyle. You can use Wash Away the Pain for a massive burst heal. You can use Water Attunement 5, 3, and then Earth 4 for lots of blasts. And, you know, maybe Arcane Brilliance if you've got that there. You can spam all of your shouts willy-nilly off cooldown. You can overload as much as you can off cooldown. You can focus on your two attunements here that give you lots of auras. And just kind of spam out Sand Schools as best you can. And you can do this on the air variant to just have tons of boons constantly thrown out. You can play it that way. And it's pretty fun. It's not too bad. Or you can play it a little bit smarter. And this is where I think the build becomes even more fun. You can play a little bit smarter. You can make sure you use your Fire Overload, okay? And then you can make sure after your Fire Overload, when you've got 10 might on you, that's when you heat sink. And that means that if people have been stood next to you, they get 10 might from the Overload. Then they get like another 13 might from you, which puts them almost to 25, even without taking this shout trait here, which you might like to do on a more DPS-y build because the regen's not so worthwhile if you're not running healing power stats. But you can do other stuff too. So let's say you're facing a lot of projectiles. Well, instead of spamming and being kind of brainless about it, you can be a bit smarter. You can overload to give a lot of reflect uptime. Then you can watch for it, and as it runs out, use Sand School. Only after it runs out. Auras won't stack duration, so you have to be smart and you have to pay attention. Then when it runs out, you can use Aftershock. Then after your Aftershock, you can rebound. So then when the reflect runs out from this, rebound ends, and you get even more reflect. And oh look, now I've got my aura back up. This is a lot of uptime on reflects that I've given the team here. See, we're still reflecting. This is all still rolling. We've been going for about 25 seconds now. And then we can go again, and then we're pretty much done at that point. But that's a hell of a lot of reflect uptime, guys. That's a hell of a lot. And that's from playing smartly by watching, by bouncing out auras properly. That's if we're facing a lot of projectiles. But this is kind of that dream scenario of Guild Wars 2 where you assess the situation you're in combat and you adjust your playstyle to suit. So there I'm seeing that there's a lot of reflects coming, a lot of projectiles coming into me, and I want to bounce reflects on myself. What if I notice there's just a lot of global chunking damage? Well then, maybe this is when I want to keep a whole ton of damage, just flat raw damage mitigation out. And in that situation, I'm going to do that same bounce strategy, but in water. So in water, we have Frost Aura here. Frost Aura tends to last longer as well on the Overload water, okay? So we've got Frost Aura here. Then we're going to have Frost Aura on our Flash Freeze. And then it's not off cooldown here, but we would have it again on Rebound, and we could Overload in water. So you can juggle quite a lot. Not quite as much on demand as Earth, but also do remember that you get a ton of Frost Aura from your traits. You're getting Frost Aura when you get hit, which is just going to happen in high-intensity situations. And you're going to get Frost Aura from Elemental Bastion. So this is even more Frost Aura. Less controllable, this stuff, but constantly pulsing out to people. Permanent protection out on people on top of that. And in this situation, you can attritively stop that damage coming in, while also, you know, instead of waiting on cooldowns as I'm doing, you can execute your other stuff to keep the other boons rolling. Again, if there's a lot of melee damage coming in, it's very rare in PvE for this to be relevant, but if there's a lot of like melee damage and flat damage and CCable enemies, you can do the exact same thing. You can start juggling your shocking auras as well. The one shout I actually don't recommend, the one part of Tempest we're not using here is Eye of the Storm, because this is a shout that actually doesn't give an aura, but that may see used in certain situations where you want to see people move fast. It's just a bit outside of the scope of the video. And so, yeah, that's a really actually fun way that you can play with the build, really focus on aura chaining. It means that by default, you can play like really spammy style, mindless gameplay if you like. you know, with your air version, where you just kind of spam this crap up. And it's particularly fun when you get big Norn characters that, you know, grab all of these obnoxious skill effects all over the place. It's cool. It's pretty interesting. Or you can take this playstyle away, instead of just stacking tons of boons, you can really think about what you're doing. You can really focus on pushing the might out. You can really focus on whatever exactly that situation calls to hand. So that's pretty much it, guys. That is the build. This is great for supporting people at hero challenges, certain events out there in the open world. Hopefully raids may see some use. That's basically the way that Auramancing on a Tempest works. Hopefully you guys have got a better understanding of it, an understanding of its place in the game. I would rate this as a very fun build, but a build, once again, that I'm eternally disappointed ArenaNet haven't designed in a game where their fun builds actually have use. We shall see how things go forward. I will give you more of my assessment of this over time. But until then, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.